Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. As my partner was on her way out the door this evening, she said, do something with that Prosecco. So I am having an Aperol Spritz, I believe it is. This is my second one. I recently heard that the actor Daniel Radcliffe filmed his later Harry Potter movies in a state of inebriation, at times blacking out. So this will be my first booktube video, somewhat under the influence. I am not much of a drinker, and I understand drinking even of water or coffee or tea is frowned upon by some booktubers in the community. Be that as it may, some time ago, within the last month, I was looking for something and I found a whole bunch of books about slavery that I hadn't been able to locate for a couple of years. We have space issues here, and so I wind up putting things behind things, putting things under things, putting things off somewhere else. I wish I had the sort of situation that some other booktubers have with walls of shelves, floor to ceiling even, but I don't. So just because I have the evening, and even though I'm not quite as alert as I probably should be, I thought I would pull all of the slavery-associated books that I could find and just review them, sort of take stock of them. Now, some of them are books I have read, and others are books that I have not read. So I just pulled this because I saw it, Chestnut, The Conjure Woman. The tales in The Conjure Woman are very nice because they give a picture of what slavery was like under the plantation system. They are stories mainly told by an ex-slave reverting back to his time under slavery. And so they're very nice, but they're not a main focus here. But this really should be. This is Library of America Slave Narratives. And I have a lot of these in other editions, but I thought I would just pull this out. Now, this does not include 12 Years a Slave, but I believe otherwise it has the major ones. And if you are going to be studying slavery, it's an essential book, or this is essential material, because while slavery has existed throughout all antiquity and since, in almost no case do we have the first-person narratives of slaves themselves. So we hear from other people about the slaves. And so this, no matter what area of focus you care to take as your own, this is indispensable. Now, Library of America also has a volume of anti-slavery agitation texts. And I don't know if I have that or not. I couldn't see it, but that in itself was not a major interest of mine, but it's probably something that I do want to pick up at some point because it is also an essential, particularly for the American experience, to get a comprehensive view of it. Now, probably one of the last books that I read was this one, Slavery and Social Death. And this book was long out of my view. I couldn't find it. And when I read this one, It is the only book that I know of that treats of slavery in all times and places. He tries to take a comprehensive view. It's not an easy read by any means, but it would be a good place to start if you are able to read this kind of sort of academic writing. And when I read this, I realized, well, with this, I probably don't need to read any more things about slavery. I was trying to get a picture of it piecemeal and somehow had never grabbed a hold of this. Now, he gives credit in the preface or in the introduction to Moses Finley, who started him on his course. Of course, Moses Finley is also a indispensable source, particularly for the study of slavery in antiquity. Now, I mentioned this in a recent video. The book is subdivided into three parts. So one talks about, society. So we have one about the ancient city, one about servitude, slavery, and the economy, and one about Mycenae and Homer. So those were three different areas of focus of Finley. And the second part, servitude, slavery, and the economy, that was, I believe, where I got my start, and I think it's sort of indispensable because he talks about things like terminology. What do we mean when we use the word slave? It's a lot less clear-cut than you would think, and it's very well to get an idea of what is being meant when people use certain words. And of course, his famous book is Ancient Slavery and Modern Ideology. And I believe no matter where you want to focus in the topic, that this is a really good book to have under your belt, so to speak. So that is the start. And now we're going to get into all kinds of sundry things that I have, as I say, some of which I have read, some of which I have not. Now this is something I picked up, Ideas of Slavery from Aristotle to Augustine, and it's Peter Garnsey, who was an associate of Finley in some sort of way. That is always a good bet for me in terms of assessing materials. Professor of the History of Classical Antiquity, University of Cambridge. Now, he has a book about social status in the Roman Republic. Rome was his focus, and I've wanted to get it, but it's only available used online for about $100, so I have avoided getting it. He has a book about ancient Rome, I believe, written with Soller, I think, who edited this. And I read that a long time ago without retaining very much. So I think so introduction, slavery and slave theory in antiquity. He wants to discuss how slavery was framed. You'll get some of that in Finley, but I believe that this will just go into greater detail. I haven't looked at this one. As I say, my need to read about slavery has probably evaporated since reading Slavery and Social Death. But I have these books, and maybe I will get to them. Now, this one is What is a Slave Society? And this also is responding to Finley, I believe, because he, in his book, talks about how while slavery has always existed in all places or whatever, that there have only been 5 genuine slave societies, 3 in the New World, 2 in antiquity. That whole idea of a slave society has been disputed. It's a useful framework when approaching the topic of slavery, but something such as this probably needs some looking into for a modern, more current perspective on what could possibly be meant by a slave society. I mean, I really do hope to get to these one day, but I'm only human, and the trouble with reading and following BookTube is I find other areas that interest me and take precedence even over this, as I say. So, M.I. Finley, Slavery in Classical Antiquity. Now, this is something he edited, and I read these. I don't remember them all that well. A lot of the usual suspects, A.H.M. Jones, that you would expect from a book of his time. He's got something in here by Westerman, who was important to him. And I don't really recall these all so well, but it is from books like these that I found other authors. So this is another one, Classical Slavery, edited by Finley. And I think in this one, okay, he's got Yvonne Garland, who he thought very highly of, and K.R. Bradley, as he says here, Keith Bradley, I believe. And I've gone on to read more of these authors. And so I read this. There's even something by Momigliano about Finley. I don't remember this stuff. My handicap as a reader is that I do not tend to remember things very well. So here's the book by Garland. I've read this twice and thought it was good, but don't really remember too much about it. Now I think we're going to get off into stuff that has just... This is a very recent purchase. Somebody talked about this. And because I have had an abiding interest in the topic, I am aware, I am sensitive to disparate sources when mention is made of them, little facets that I did not know about. And so I just picked it up, not really because I intended to read it anytime soon, but just because I thought, well, it's something that I should be aware of. And you know, if I were to put it in a notebook somewhere, I would not remember. Now this talks about the revolution in Haiti. This is, of course, an indispensable book. I really need to reread this one because there's parts that I remember from it that I can't locate in the book. And of course, I first heard of this book through Finley. He makes mention of it. And I was thinking of something else. I mean, obviously, more contemporary treatments probably exist, but this was pretty groundbreaking, I think. Between that and this, Eric Williams, I have a whole history of the Caribbean by this author. Growing up in the U.S., you tend to think of slavery as a United States thing. And when you read more, you begin to realize that it was a Caribbean thing, coming on the heels of Columbus, or with Columbus even, and that what happened in the United States was at the tail end of that. And in order to understand things, you have to really get the bigger picture. So where I had started years ago, say with the letters and speeches of Abraham Lincoln, while good, it is not sufficient. So Capitalism and Slavery. I don't know if this has been superseded by anything, but it is really a must-read, I think, as well, to understand some of the profiting that was done off of these men and women who were enslaved. So much of this has been kept out of public view, so to speak. I think the internet has been breaking that open more, but still great efforts are constantly underway to minimize this sort of thing. And so I think it's an essential book. Now, this one I've never gotten to either. Sugar, Slavery, and Freedom in 19th century Puerto Rico, which I want to. I need to get a better understanding of Puerto Rico. Now, in pulling these books, I've tried to segregate the books. I have a whole another slew of books about sugar, and unless I've seen that slavery is specifically mentioned in the title, I'm not pulling them down for the sake of this video. Sugar is a topic of endless fascination as well. So this is one that I hope to get to, or at one time hoped to get to. Nobody much anymore, and this is sort of haphazard here, nobody much anymore talks about Basil Davidson. I read this long ago, possibly before I had read any Finley, and before I had given any thought to slavery in particular. And I think it was a pretty good book, but as I say, I don't remember too much about it. Now, this next one is really nice as far as the abolition of the slave trade. It's a pretty easy read. Of course, we all know this famous illustration, and he talks a little bit about how the reproduction of that was instrumental in turning the tide of public sentiment against this evil practice. So I just pulled this. E.D. Morel has talked a lot about slavery in the Congo, the slave state, as it were, and I am separating out books about the Congo as well. That's not the books I wanted to pull for this. So now we get into Keith Bradley, whom I mentioned. Slaves and Masters in the Roman Empire, Slavery and Society at Rome. You would think with titles like these, there's a lot of duplication, but there wasn't. You learn things such as, tidbits about, like, the philosopher Cicero, the efforts he went to try to recapture an escaped slave of his. It's just a good reminder when we are studying a figure like Cicero to understand that he was a slaveholder and was not against the system. And then this one, Slavery and Rebellion in the Roman World. This one I particularly enjoyed because it's really nice to get a little bit more information about Spartacus and about how the rebellions came about and went down, so to speak. So those are my Bradley books. He edited or wrote I think it's the first volume of the Cambridge World History of Slavery. There's 4 volumes, and each one costs about $100, so I never wound up picking it up. That's been the case of innumerable titles on slavery that I felt I should have some exposure to, but that is how things go. Now, this book is only, I think, in the last year out in a Library of America edition, Black Reconstruction in America, and I think it's really a good look at the demise of slavery in the United States. I'm covering up this little sticker. I did not buy this book at the Moomin shop. I just thought that the sticker would make the cover look a little bit nicer. If I come across a copy, or if the price goes down, I will pick this up in the Library of America edition. It's not an easy read by any means. It probably needs multiple viewings, so to speak, to really understand all of his arguments. But as I say, we've been sort of taught to believe that Old Man Lincoln came on the scene and said, "Slavery, be gone," and then it was gone. And that is not at all how things transpired. So there's that. I just pulled Harriet Jacobs. I have a couple of editions of this, and I have a look at the texts relating to Jacobs, or essays about her text, literary criticism, so to speak, about this work. As I say, these narratives are really indispensable, and I've never read Booker T. Washington, but he had slavery in the title, so I pulled that down. Now, I found this book very useful, The Sugar Masters. He talks specifically, well, it says planters and slaves in Louisiana's cane world. So it's a very specific focus. And this is really, aside from the first-person slave narratives, this is about the only book I've ever read about the American institution. So I really am not all that well-versed in what went down in America, but a lot of good information. You realize in here what a pivotal part, and I forget, there's a technical term they use for it. It's overwork or something like that, where in addition to their hours, whatever it is, 12 hours per day of unpaid labor per day, enslaved peoples were enticed to work extra, say gathering firewood for pay, and that working for pay is an essential ingredient in the, or was an essential ingredient in the system. I think as modern forms of slavery seem to be taking root, the working for money aspect predominates. We must pay attention to modern ideology and cannot be as crudely and blatantly exploitative of those we take advantage of in a society. So things have changed, but this was a very good book. Now, to show you an example of just the kind of book, I hear about something and I pick it up. I don't know anything about this, but it's a South Carolina slave community, and I really owe it to myself to learn a little bit more about the American South. And Charles Joyner is a historian of some repute, known to people on BookTube because of certain familial connections. And I will say no more about that. So, European slave trading in the Indian Ocean, this was very good, and I don't remember a lot about it. I am always hampered by the lack of geography, and so I retain very little, but there is a very interesting island in the Indian Ocean that I wish I could remember the name of, that had an interesting place in the whole system. Now, oddly enough, way back in the day, this is one of the first books about slavery that I read by Bernard Lewis, and I think it's another good introduction to the topic of slavery in the Islamic world. I'm sure there are other treatments and better ones, but it was a nice, brief introduction. This book, I remember being somewhat disappointed by it, but The Rise and Fall of the Plantation Complex, the title says exactly what I was looking for, in that you have to understand that this huge industrial complex evolved, and it needs to be studied as a thing in itself. Well, I won't talk about, as I say, sugar is not my thing, but it's something I probably need to look at again as well. And Sharif, Slaves, Spices, and Ivory in Zanzibar. I don't think I've touched this one. I've read at least another book by this author and liked it, Abdul Sharif. And so I think he's pretty good, but I just don't have any recollection of having read this one, but I would trust it. Keep moving on. We're coming down to the end. Slaves, freedmen, and indentured laborers in colonial Mauritius. And I'm pretty sure I read this one, but don't remember much about it as well. But it's very useful to understand how widespread the activity has been. It's kind of an odds and ends sort of collection. And this one I have not gotten to as yet. Slavery in Medieval and Early Modern Iberia. It's another one that I need to cover. Now, this anthology or collection of essays was really marvelous. I haven't looked at it for a long time. So Sex, Power, and Slavery, edited by Gwyn Campbell and Elizabeth Elborn. I think I might have something else by Gwyn Campbell, because I liked his essay. I believe it's a hymn. But let me see. Abdul Sharif is in here, so I must have liked his. I'm guessing that this may be where I first heard of him then. There was one in here that was just so nice. I can't remember. There's a whole lot of them. So let me just tell you what the subcategories are here. Paradigms and overviews, points of departure and return, concubinage, law and the family, sexuality and slavery in the households of the Atlantic world, sex trafficking and prostitution, art, sexuality and slavery, queering, the study of slavery, and legacies, discourse, dishonor, and labor. As I say, I don't remember a lot, but there are points that I remember from a couple of the essays which were mind-expanding. This book was also a very good book. Now, he only talks about slavery in one state, and this is another sugar book, but he does talk about slavery also quite a bit. It's I mean, of course, the two are interrelated. And this is one that I haven't gotten to. Mistresses and Slaves. It's one that I hope to get to. I think I just came across it in the clearance bin somewhere, so it's never been a priority. And what's the last thing I have? Oh, the last thing is just the From Columbus to Castro, which is the Eric Williams. I put the cover was bad or something, so I put a make-do jacket on it from Columbus to Castro, the history of the Caribbean. And as I say, I think a work like this is indispensable for understanding the American experience. So this is just a brief show and tell. I'm letting my bubbles go flat here. I've been hampered in my life by not being a very strong reader. So of these books, maybe I've read half of them. Of course, the ones by Finley I've read multiple times. Bradley, at least once, some possibly more than once. And as I said, the Garland I read twice. But you find your prerogatives shift. And so now I'm not really sure how much further I need to take the subject, but I thought I would show these books to you. I'm not a scholar of the subject. I'm not a scholar of any sort, actually. But I do think that slavery is a subject about which it is useful to know something. Thank you for stopping by my channel.